Hi, my name is Anna Mills, and I'm glad to be invited to talk a little bit about assessing writing in the era of AI. Um, so let's get started. I don't claim to have the answers on this quickly evolving and complex and difficult subject, but I just want to put some ideas and questions out there for you on whether and how we can tell AI text from student writing. um, Ideas on sample policies on AI, and assignment design to discourage misuse of AI. So, first, as you probably know, there is software that's designed to predict whether text is likely AI or not. However, as you may have heard, it's not reliable. And unfortunately, it's not expected to become reliable. Um, So these are some of the companies that make this software, Turnitin, and there are many others as well, Zero GPT, GPT Zero, Check GPT is part of Packback, Crossplage AI Content Detector, AIWritingCheck.org. Um, they all have some of the same concerns. So in this article in the MIT Technology Review, um, the journalist found that we're extremely unlikely to ever get a tool that can spot AI generated text with 100% certainty, um, in part because AI generated text is designed to mimic human seeming text. That's how it's designed. And we've increasingly seen concerns about the unreliability of these detectors all last spring and into the summer. So, this article dated August 9th in Times Higher Ed reviews various studies that suggest that these detectors do produce false positives. So, a first example of that was seen in the Washington Post reporting back in April, where they found that the Turnitin's detector flagged an innocent student. And we've seen many more anecdotes of that since then, and reporting and studies on it, so that even Turnitin has just recognized in June that its detector was less accurate than they thought initially. And the Washington Post also has reported on that as well. I should mention that the slides are available for this, and you're welcome to use them for links, but also let me go back to give you the link. It is CCSF AI writing. CCSF AI is all caps and writing is lowercase. So you're welcome to comment on them. They're also open licensed if you want to use them for anything. Um, so the other concern we've seen beyond accuracy is that these detectors have been shown to be biased against non-native English writers. So English language learners writing is more likely to be falsely flagged as AI than the writing of US born eighth graders in this Stanford study. Um, so there's a real concern. This researcher said the numbers are grim, and there's a significant difference in how likely students' writing is to be falsely flagged as AI. So if we can't reliably detect AI text with one of these systems, and I should note that OpenAI says that they are working on researching different provenance techniques, including watermarking, for labeling AI text and detecting it. However, we run into some similar questions about how reliable that will be and how easily circumvented it might be, and whether it will be enforceable to get AI systems to put these watermarks on. So I think we have to look at, if we can't reliably detect it, how can we deter misuse? And I would say the first step the low-hanging fruit is to clarify with students what is acceptable and what isn't. So explicit policies with specific reference to these systems like ChatGPT. Um, and this is one of the things that we called for in a task force that I am involved in, the MLA CCCC Task Force on Writing in AI. One of our recommendations in our recent working paper was to make policy explicit. So, and noting that we're building on our teaching around source citation, that we want to promote an ethic of transparency around any use of AI text. So making policy that refers to that is really building on an ethos that's already part of what we do. Um, and we called for faculty involvement in forming those policies. And we were also advising the use of an iterative policy process. So we're reflecting and revising that policy as we go, as we know the technology is changing. And I would also just note, I find this a really powerful statement of rights for educators and students around AI, the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights for Education by Catherine Conrad, published in Critical AI, a journal from Duke University Press. And one of the rights that she identifies or articulates for students is you should be able to expect clear guidance from your instructor on whether and how you are allowed to use automated systems for your work. Um, and those guidelines should make clear which systems are appropriate for any given assignment, if any. Um, and one thing to note when thinking about policy is that if we can be more specific about types of AI use, aware of types of AI use, that's helpful because students have started to use it for things like generating ideas, even if they're not using the text verbatim. So is it okay to generate an outline and then write the essay yourself? Is it okay to auto-generate an essay and then paraphrase it yourself in your own words? Another form that you might see would be grammar and stylistic suggestions. So is it okay to ask a system to edit your paper? And the thing to note there also is that some people have said you can tell it's AI if the grammar is flawless, but it's also possible that the student wrote the paper and then got AI to edit it, in which case they wouldn't be copying it from AI. They'd be more something like we're used to with Grammarly, where the changes have been grammatical or stylistic. So where would we draw the line related to that? And what about giving a draft to AI and asking it to, say, cut or expand or change the tone, asking it to revise? Where would the line be on that? Okay, so lots of things to consider, but I think it's also helps to start simple, as I did last fall with just my very basic policy, asking students to use an AI text generator only if the assignment explicitly calls for it or allows it, and follow assignment guidelines to disclose which text comes from the AI. So that was basically all I put in my syllabus, and I'm starting with that again this semester, but I'm just going to add in more specifics as I go. And here's another example that really is a little bit more stern, saying content generated by an artificial intelligence third-party service or site, AI generated content without proper attribution or authorization would also be a form of plagiarism. And that's from Illinois State University. So just that, making it explicit. But there's a really rich set of policies that have been shared online. A few of my favorites are this one by Whitney Gegg Harrison, the Monash University policy, and Joel Glad's policy, which is open licensed. So you can copy and adapt it. And then I've put together some other statements in my Writing Across the Curriculum Clearinghouse resource list. And Lance Eaton of College Unbound has curated a wonderful set of classroom policies that he puts all into one document. And I think that's a really helpful resource. I would also just note that ideally, these policies can help build critical AI literacy. So they can be a starting point for discussion with students about why you might not want to use an AI for certain purposes, but also about what are the risks of AI systems like inaccuracy, bias, missed opportunities for thinking practice, or the tendency to anthropomorphize or project onto these systems. Um, and this example from Juan David Gutierrez in Colombia talks about low risk and high risk uses of text generation AI. So it tries to acknowledge to students that, different kinds of uses will have different impacts, and to make it clear what the criteria are for that. So just to move on from policy, I wanted to share a little bit about assignment design to discourage misuse. And I think there's going to be a lot of familiar things in here. The good news is that the things we're already probably doing and working on are often ways to discourage undisclosed use of AI. Best practices in writing pedagogy, like talking with students about why we assign writing in the first place, how writing is a means to foster learning and cognitive development, critical thinking. Um, and I like this passage from the Association for Writing Across the Curriculum, that writing is a mode of learning, that students develop understanding and insights through the act of writing, um, and that this is still fundamental um, to learning in higher education, the writing process. Um, so I think for me, like, that means I like to share about how the writing process helps my own thinking, um, and focus on intrinsic motivation. So not just sharing that it helps our critical thinking, but creating assignments where that has intrinsic meaning for students. And allowing room for creativity and original thought and choice around the focus of the assignment. All of those things can help, of course, deter cheating. So emphasizing purpose and engagement, I think I covered that. We kind of know that already, though, right? Um, Talking about writing in the context of community. So purpose in relation to an audience, in relation to the teacher and peers, having conferences with students, maybe offering video feedback, having students talk with us about their writing, even if that's in audio or video notes, and peer review, right? So um, making the whole writing as conversation thing come alive, right? Um, and then, of course, teaching the writing process. So that could include starting with collaborative annotation of the texts we're reading, margin notes, pre-writing brainstorming, reflections, metacognitive work, peer review, revision. You can mimic all those things using an AI system. You can ask ChatGPT to do sort of each step of this. But it starts to seem cumbersome. It starts to seem less attractive. And if we're teaching the writing process, maybe the writing process feels more accessible anyway if we're going step by step. It's less intimidating and it's less last minute. Another approach is sort of having an open discussion at the beginning of the course about AI, what student perceptions are, concerns, how have they used it? Um, what do they think the policies should be? Um, Looking through examples of when do we need to know that you've used AI? Do we need to know you've used Grammarly? Maybe not, but do we need to know that you got ideas from ChatGPT? Maybe so. It needs to be cited. So I think working with students and creating that collaborative sense of, policies are being formed and we as teachers are figuring this out. So let's talk about it together to some extent. Um, and then kind of a rule of thumb for disclosure that I suppose this goes in the policy section, but if you would credit a human for similar assistance, then you should credit ChatGPT or whichever system you're using. And ideally, you would also credit or at least refer to the unknown human authors that that language model was trained on. Which is, a big problem in academia, that, you can cite ChatGPT, but you don't know where ChatGPT got the ideas or even sometimes the text. So there's kind of an ethical conundrum there that we definitely need to explore with our students, and acknowledge. I have a friend who likes to ask students to affirm that they have labeled AI text as such. So just an honor system affirmation. Another thing I really want to try in the fall is asking students to share their version history in Google Docs or Word. Um, and so that, especially if students are concerned about their writing being wrongly flagged as AI, this could be reassuring to say, well, you've got your version history. We can see that you've been working on this, right? You can show that. Um, and this is from a Times Higher Ed article by Dave Sayers. That idea, he lays it out. But I also found a couple references to the DraftBack Chrome extension that lets you replay kind of the construction of a document, and I wanted to show you that. So here in Google Docs, I've got it installed, and hopefully you can see up here. Oh. So if I'm in Google Docs and I have my DraftBack extension installed, I'm going to see this little button at the top of the dock that says DraftBack. And when I click that, it's going to take me to sort of a replay of my document creation that looks like this. So it shows how I brainstormed over time. It's replaying it and it's showing the whole document. I can pause it. I can advance it to the end and sort of see the last bit of that process. Shows deletions as well. And I can also look at statistics on the document creation. So this document analysis from DraftBack shows the time that I started and how much was written and added to the document throughout the time that I worked on it. So that's DraftBack. Of course, there's also just version history. If you go to File and go down to Version History, see Version History, you can go back to previous versions that will show what was added at what time. So that's DraftBack, and I have seen references to teachers using this over years to sort of track student writing process and to verify that they're not copy and pasting their whole document. Of course, we would want to be careful with that if they have multiple documents. So if they're working with a brainstorm, they might copy and paste that legitimately into the draft. So we might want to ask students to work with the same document from the beginning and let them know that we're going to be looking at their process if we do intend to do that. And ideally, I think sharing a version history should be part of an invitation to students to reflect on that writing process. So having students mark up their version history would really be ideal and comment on, this is where I realized I could pull the thesis out of the conclusion and put it in the beginning, right? So if they were actually sort of looking at it themselves and using it to help them reflect on what they've learned through writing and how their writing has evolved. That could be powerful, as well as helping us sort of identify or deter AI misuse. However, we should note that this does not completely prevent cheating, as Lance Eaton observed in a response to that article, that students can just retype AI text. They could be looking at another screen and typing in what ChatGPT said, if they really want to go there. One other tip is that if you do incorporate AI and you allow, say, chat sessions, you could ask for transcripts of those sessions so you can see in that transcript what the prompt was, what their output was, what the follow-up prompt was, etc. And that's very easy to do now in ChatGPT, to get a web page that shows the transcript of the chat session. But I think we have to note that distinguishing AI from human text is going to get more difficult, and there will be gray areas. Dr. Sarah Elaine Eaton is an expert on academic integrity at, I think, University of Calgary, and she has written that she thinks hybrid writing will become the norm, and that trying to determine where the human ends and where the artificial intelligence begins is pointless and futile. That is quite daunting. I'm not ready to accept that idea. But I do recognize that there are going to be murky areas. And that's, the interface for AI going forward, and any regulation will shape that. So right now, Google is offering beta text generation within Google Docs. And the way that works is you just see this little help me write. You tell it what you want, and then that's inserted in your Google Doc. And it's not marked in the version history as AI. So maybe it could be marked. Maybe we want to build some kind of alternate interface that allows us to track what's AI and what's not. But we'd have to advocate for that. So I have this sort of list of strategies if you want to use this to have discussion of which of these approaches would be most effective, which should be prioritized. These are basically all the things that I've gone over: explicit policies and affirmations, that text is a student's own. In-class writing, I didn't talk about too much, but certainly I think many have suggested that as an approach. Tools for identifying AI text, conferencing with students or video and audio of them discussing their work, assigning steps in the writing process. I should probably take out the incorporating images, video, and audio, because we know that OpenAI's sort of latest iteration has image analysis capabilities, so it will write an analysis of a visual argument. I think that's only in beta now, but I wouldn't rely on that. Assigning writing by hand, or switching to forms of assessment other than writing. I guess that would be for my other presentations for other disciplines. So if you want to have discussion of that, could go, feel free. And then just a few other resources. This is a quick start guide from the MLA CCC task force that I mentioned. So it just kind of has a few questions and then 4 or 5 sources per question if you want to start there. Or there's this broader resource list from the Writing Across the Curriculum Clearinghouse that I continue to work on. You're welcome to suggest new sources for it. It's like 10 pages long now, so it's ridiculous. But I hope this has been helpful, and I hope to get to be with you live again soon for these discussions. But in the meantime, feel free to comment on the slide deck and or email me. I still have my amills@ccsf.edu. Okay, thanks very much.